This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
If you love chilling mysteries, unsolved cases, and a touch of mom-style humor, Moms and Mysteries is the podcast you've been searching for. Hey guys, I'm Mandy.
And I'm Melissa. Join us every Tuesday for Moms and Mysteries, your gateway to gripping, well-researched true crime stories. Each week, we deep dive into a variety of mind-boggling cases as we shed light on everything from heists to whodunits. We're your go-to podcast for mysteries with a motherly touch. Subscribe now to Moms and Mysteries wherever you get your podcasts.
Emma Straub, celebrated author, celebrated bookseller, Guggenheim Fellowship Award recipient.
You can actually just call me a Guggenheim Fellow. That's what we're called.
Guggenheim Fellow. And also, by the way, one of the first guests on the Third Story podcast, which we should not
Very
overlook.
important.
I'd like to add one more job title to your resume that many may not know. Former and recovering personal assistant turned merchandiser to Stephin Merritt and the Magnetic Fields.
Yeah, I mean, I would say those in the biz would say merch girl.
Yeah.
Magnetic Fields merch girl. And yes, Stephen's personal assistant from 2002 to 2006.
Okay.
Something like that.
So before all of these other wonderful things happened for you, just tell me the story.
Okay, well, one thing that I'll say is that, I mean, it does sound like it has nothing to do with my life as a writer, but it's actually not true, because the Magnetic Fields, they've got a really smart fan base, and a lot of their fans are incredible writers. The first couple of times I went to see them after I was done with college, it was because writers who my parents were friends with were opening up for them.
And who was that?
Neil Gaiman,
Yeah.
and Kelly Link. It was fun for me to be like, oh, come with me to see these bands that I love. And it meant that I was able to have some sort of access to them that I mean, thinking about it now, like I could have had that access just because they are extremely open and very friendly. Mm-hmm. But it meant that there was this very direct introduction.
So there was a part of you that was thinking, if I take my parents, and it was a birthday or an anniversary.
It was my
right?
mother's birthday. We were so drunk.
But there's a part of you that's thinking, if I go with my parents, and because Neil is there, whatever, then my parents will go backstage with my parents. I'll probably get to meet the band also.
Yeah, which I did not want to do. I did not want to do.
You were a Magnetic Fields fan.
I was a huge fan.
Going back to college?
Yes, and I loved them so much. I mean, they're perfect. They're perfect. They're the best band. They're better than anybody else, let's face it. For me, there are two best bands. It's the Magnetic Fields and the New Kids on the Block. And it's all about things that pierce you most deeply. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I'll come back for my New Kids on the Block episode another time.
I expect nothing less.
You know, I was an English major. I was a writer. I was a poet. And I loved his lyrics so much. I mean, to me, there is just no one smarter or funnier.
Yeah.
Who also writes songs where you can just cry and feel so sad about your lost love or whatever it is, you know?
On the Ferris wheel, looking out on Coney Island, under more stars than there are prostitutes in Thailand, our hair in the air, our lips blue from cotton candy. When we kiss, it feels like a flying saucer landing.
It is. It's smart and it's emotional. It kind of ticks both boxes. Did you start with 69 Love Songs, or had you found their records before that?
I think 69 Love Songs was out. I remember I bought them individually.
That was a thing you could do?
That was a thing you could do.
Because there were 3 albums, each of 23 songs.
Yeah, so it was a 3 CD box set, but I bought them individually first. What was so nice was that they had so many records already, so I sort of gobbled them up all at once.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it was so soon after that I graduated from college, and I was working in publishing, and I hated it. And this friend of my dad's, a guy named L.D. Bechtal, who sang on 69 Love Songs, was at my parents' house. And he said to my parents, Stephen is looking for a personal assistant. I think he thought my parents might just they were like grown-ups.
Yeah, they
Maybe
might know
they knew
people.
how that worked. And I just sort of volunteered myself. And then a couple of days later, Claudia, Claudia and Stephen met me at a coffee shop in the East Village and read me Stephen's to-do list. And I was like, oh, I have this job.
The fact that you met with Claudia is a key detail also, because Claudia Gonson is Stephen's longtime partner. The magnetic field, Stephin Merritt is basically the songwriter and the creative force, and often the singer. And Claudia has been there from the very beginning. They met when they were teenagers. She was in high school, I think, when they met.
Yeah, I think she was 16. Her older sister brought him home. And then Stephen became friends with Claudia.
She's been a musical partner, is his manager, I believe, or the manager of the magnetic field, has been kind of everything to him.
Yeah, she sings, she plays piano, she used to play the drums, and then the drums were too loud. But yeah, I mean, if you're trying to get to Stephen, you're going to go through Claudia.
Right.
Washington, D.C., it's the greatest place to be. It's not the cherries everywhere in blue. It's not the way they put folks on the moon. No, no, no. It's not the spectacles and pageantry, the thousand things you've got to see. It's just that's where my baby waits for me.
So you met with Stephen and Claudia all these years ago. How many years ago is this? 20-something years ago.
23 years ago.
Right. And you have a meeting with the two of them. Did you know what the dynamic was between the two of them before you sat down at that meeting?
I guess I had an idea. Yeah, I think I understood a little bit just because, in the setting up of that, I understood. And I had seen them live several times already at that point.
Yeah.
So I understood their banter, which feels like a sibling relationship where, sometimes they're sort of bickering, but you understand there is such a depth of experience between them that is quite beautiful.
Being a personal assistant to an artist is not all rock and roll all day long. What did you do?
Oh, it was great. I've never before felt so like I could do a job. Well, so one of the first things I do was Stephen had just moved into his brown phase where he was going from everything that he had worn, which included things of different colors, a lot of stripes, a lot of Marimekko, a lot of leather jackets, into brown. Stephen only wears brown.
Still?
Still. Tones, different shades, but brown. So we had to get rid of all of his old clothing and we had to get him all new clothing, basically. I mean, over time, not all at once.
Did he talk about why he was moving to brown?
Why would I ask a question like that? No. I mean, I think that he just decided, Stephen likes boundaries. He likes rules. I'm going to write 69 love songs, or these songs have no...
These have a lot of noise in the... These are bloopy,
yeah.
These are noisy, these are acoustic, whatever, yeah.
He likes organizing principles. I don't know, I bought a lot of dog food, I took things to be repaired, and then I did have a couple of jobs that were sort of music related, where I made him like a lyric book of all of his lyrics. I cataloged all of his instruments for insurance purposes.
There's a wonderful documentary in which you appear called
Strange Powers.
Strange Powers, thank you, from 2009-ish, I think. And you see him in his apartment at the time. It's just filled with equipment, and you can see how he loved to tinker, and he loves synthesizers, and he loves all this stuff.
He had a studio that was it was the biggest room in the apartment. It was like a full bedroom was in a studio.
He famously likes to write in bars.
Yeah.
There's one bar in particular that he liked, but I think he's open to writing in different bars.
Sure. Yeah.
Did you see him do it?
No, because that's at night. So what I would do, I would get there at noon.
Yeah.
I would often wake him up or
Be with him when he woke up.
Yeah. And then we would go through his mail, go through his email, and then I would have, various errands and tasks to do. And we would sort of be together all afternoon, and then we would end my workday really with him going off to work at the bars.
Going to work might be DJing, or it might be sitting at a bar writing.
Yeah, no, I think it would be like going with a notebook to go sit at a bar and write and be.
Your sense of it was that was the work.
Yeah.
Go to the bar and write.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you ever get a sense of why that was, or what was going on? Like the chaos somehow unlocked something for him?
Yeah, I don't know. Don't you think that all writers are weird? Like all writers have things that make it easier or harder for us to do what we need to do. And I don't know. I never questioned it or judged it at all.
Yeah.
I mean, that was his process.
So now, help me just paint the picture of Stephin. Your experience, like all of this basically just points to your credibility in talking about Stephin.
Now what I see is Stephin's brain works a certain way, and it's better than most people's brains. And like, if you ask him a question, he's going to think about it before he answers. And most of us are not used to people doing that. And so, especially if you're like an anxious person like I am, like I love to fill air. And so when you're talking to someone and they're not saying much and you're starting to, things can go off the rails. But really, like, he will answer a question and he will be as forthright as he cares to be. You know what I mean? Like, he's not gonna be some like mushy interview for you, but he will genuinely think about what you're asking him and try to answer to the best of his ability. Like, he's not rude. He's not. He is careful and he's thoughtful. And I feel very protective of him.
Well, clearly, and I was able to speak to him for this episode because you made that happen. And I know that when I went into it and looking back on it, I think I probably had a lot more going for me than I realized going into the interview because you had asked him to do it. And so he was doing it because you love each other. And I went in, having thought about him deeply for like 2 weeks before talking to him and asking you all these questions and thinking about him because his story is so unusual. His music is unusual. His brain is unusual. The way he's approached his career is unusual. The sounds that he is attracted to are kind of eclectic and hard to pin down. He's so prolific. I mean, as you say, he decided to make an album called 69 Love Songs. Years later, he decided that for his 50th birthday, he would write 50 songs, each one representing a different age of his life. And he seems to do it very easily. I mean, in fact, I asked him about 69 Love Songs, and I said, did you get to 63 and think just 6 more to go? And he said, no, of course not. I overwrote. I wrote 100 songs to get to the 69. So it was not, for most of his career, hard for him to write. On the other hand, the part of his story that is so fascinating is he moved something like 23 times before he was 18 years old. He didn't know his father until he was an adult. His mother was a kind of searcher in her own right and took him along for the ride. And that can go a lot of different ways. I still am not totally clear on whether or not he is exceptional as a result of that, or if she sort of got lucky, or they got lucky with each other, that he turned out to be a very exceptional and unusual kid who, through that process of having been moved so many times, actually found a voice in the midst of all of the disruption. So that's what I was thinking about going into this conversation. Like, I wonder what I can get to in this, where are we going to go in this? And I was asking you all these questions, and you prepared me a little bit. He grew up gay, short, being moved around the world by his mother, having to sort of fend for himself. And somewhere along the way, he discovered books and music. And I think that it's fair to say kind of saved his life.
And movies. And I mean, Stephin, he knows everything, like, about science fiction science fiction movies. He knows every record. Like he's like a hungry hippo for the things that he loves. You know, it's one of the reasons that my dad loved him so much. And I think it's because they had a similar thing where, like, you know, you're a kid and you're in a space that maybe you're like, well, I'm not like everybody else here. And then you discover those people out in the world coming to you through records or films or books.
Right. And Stephen said that he thought maybe he was going to be a filmmaker. He wanted to be a film director and a writer. Yes. And I think, like your dad and Stephen, and there are people for whom what you love really is who you are, or really makes who you are. And so when you talk about the things that you love, what you're really hearing is, this is who I am.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of what he represents culturally?
The fact that he doesn't have a MacArthur is criminal. It's ridiculous.
Why do you think he has gone underappreciated?
Well, okay, so this isn't true for the MacArthur, but I do feel like there is a certain, like, Gen X quality that, you know, you have to apply for lots of stuff. You know, I did get a Guggenheim Fellowship, and I had to apply for it. And it was the first time I had ever applied for something like that. And, like, I don't know, I can't really see him doing that kind of thing. Being like, here is why you should give me money for my songs. But I think he should, because I think everyone would give him money. Because how could you not give him money? Because he's Stephin Merritt.
As you say, he was the smartest writer that you had heard, and he also made you cry. And he seemed to really be in touch with the sort of humanity of heartbreak and longing. He also says that as an only child, his position on other people is that he resents the existence of anybody else on the planet. He said it to me. I've heard him say it in his documentary. And I did want to talk to him about, like, connecting with other people's lived experience or an autobiography, because there is a sense that maybe he's telling the truth. I think he's actually making up a lot of stories. He is really a proper writer and storyteller, because talking to him, I get the sense it's not autobiographical.
Well, but, like, I mean, I think that that's one of the great things about being an artist. Other than the 50-song memoir, he's not a memoirist.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that there are moments, bits in lots of things that come from his personal experience, and that there are probably 100 times more that do not. And that's fine. You know, like,
well, this is why I think he has more in common with, I mean, I think that your assumption was that he and I would have a lot of stuff in common because we're both multi-instrumentalists and producers, and we have that shared musical language. But I actually think you and he have as much in common or more in common.
Because I make things up.
Because you make things up and people assume that they're true. And they always want to know, is this true? Is this about something? And you've said, everything is true and everything is a lie. Everything is true because I thought of it and I truly thought of it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you're right. I would rather die than ask him, oh, is this song about this person? Like, what a rude question. Never in my life would I do that.
Do you think it's rude when people ask you that about your writing?
Yes. I mean, I also think that, like, you can ask someone anything, but you can't assume that they will want to answer you.
What else should we say about Stephin Merritt before I play this interview?
He's very good at Scrabble. He wrote a book illustrated by Roz Chast containing all 101 two-letter Scrabble words. My 11-year-old has it memorized.
Oh, wow.
That's important. He's one of the most loyal people I know.
Because this is the introduction to the podcast, there's a little bit of housekeeping that you're going to help me do right now, Emma Straub.
Okay.
First of all, don't forget third-story.com, because that is where you can visit the entire archive. It's hundreds of conversations, deep diving ones like this one, including an early episode with Emma Straub.
Yeah.
Also, Substack, leosidran.substack.com. You, Emma, I think were my first supporter on Substack.
We have to support the artists in our life.
I love Substack. I love that community. I think it is a really fun place. You have a Substack too.
Yeah.
What is it?
I don't know. It's
You don't know
Emma
what-
Straub.
It's emmastraub.substack.com.
I guess so.
I think so. So that's another place that you should go and hang out if you want more of this wonderful stuff. The podcast is made in partnership with WBGO. It's wbgo.org/studios. Also, books are magic. If you live in Brooklyn, you got to go to Books Are Magic.
And if you don't live in Brooklyn, you can go to www.booksaremagic.net. You're going to want to say .com, but it's not. It's .net.
Emma Straub, thank you so much for providing some context and positivity and energy to this wonderful conversation.
My pleasure. Stephen's the greatest. Hooray, hooray.
The book of love is long and boring. No one can lift the damn thing. It's full of charts and facts and figures and instructions for dancing. But I love it when you read to me and you can read me anything.
Stephen, I really appreciate you taking time to talk to me, especially because this is kind of an interview apropos of nothing in particular. There's not an album that we're promoting or a story that you're in the process of telling. But I do realize that I'm talking to you kind of shortly after your 60th birthday. You have gone out of your way to mark certain birthdays and events in your life. You certainly spent a lot of time around your 50th birthday. And I understand even when you turned 40 that you announced it was in fact your 50th birthday. So you leaned into being 50 for a long time.
Yes, on my 40th birthday, I wore a 50th birthday t-shirt.
Why did you do that? What did that mean to you?
I thought since I was going into that patch of birthdays, I would turn 50 until I turned 60, and then I would turn 70 until I turned 80.
And have you honored that?
Well, no, 50-song memoir kind of broke up that process. I generally don't make a big deal out of my birthdays. The last birthday I had, I didn't have a party. I didn't tell anyone. I went off and stayed at the TWA Hotel at JFK Airport.
Why?
Because I wish I lived at the TWA Hotel. It's a gorgeous Euro-Sarin and modernist masterpiece from 1962 that looks like it's 2062.
Of all the places that you could go, I understand there's an architectural aspect to that. But also, it's sitting right next to an airport. It represents movement and travel and impermanence. And, forgive me for going there so quickly, but as I think about you, something that is so striking about your life is the beginning of your life, the amount of time that you spent moving around as a kid. I mean, much more than anybody I've ever heard of. No army brat could possibly compare or compete with what you went through.
Well, I was an army brat briefly. My first language is German, but mostly I was a hippie brat. Is that a TIAC A3440 in the background?
Yeah.
Nice. I grew up on the TIAC A4440. The difference seems to be that the view meters are in a row rather than in a square. So you were saying that the TWA hotel being at an airport represents impermanence. And although I'm not a Buddhist, I was raised Buddhist. And for me, everything represents impermanence exactly equally. Although you could say that the vacuum of space represents not impermanence, but nothingness.
Why did you move around so much?
Ask my mother. It wasn't my choice.
Did you like it?
I certainly liked Hawaii. I liked Baden-Baden, Germany. It was a gorgeous canal town. We must have lived somewhere else I liked. Maybe not.
It's an unusual background. At some point you discover gear, you discover making things, discover songwriting. You had to have spent a lot of time alone. You didn't have any time to spend in any town long enough to develop lasting relationships with your peers. Did you feel connected to your peers? Did you feel connected to other kids as a kid?
Never understood the word peer. No, I still don't feel connected to my, quote, peers, unquote. Yeah, I am very much an only child, and I'm happy to remain that way.
I guess that means that you didn't compare yourself to other people in terms of what you were into or what you were doing?
Yeah, one of the things about being an only child is that other people are irrelevant and you don't need to compare yourself to them. But I also don't know to what degree other people compare themselves to other people, nor do I probably care. But yeah, maybe somebody with a lot of siblings is always comparing themselves to others. I don't know what the point of that would be.
Do you think that you have a sense of understanding of what other people go through? You know, your songs have so often reached into the experience of loss and love and just the human experience in a way that so many people have connected to. Do you feel that you relate to other people and what they go through?
If I do, it's probably through other songs. You know, being an only child is like being a sociopath. How other people feel is not immediately relevant to you. But also, I think being a songwriter, you necessarily have to ignore everyone else for as long as it takes to write the song, unless you're collaborating. And I have just slipped into something that I can't stand from other people's interviews, which is talking about oneself in second person. You are free to lapse into second person when talking about yourself, but I don't like it as an interview tick.
Interviews are a tricky thing, man. You know, it's tricky on all sides. I'm very aware of it and the conventions of it, which I try to avoid and also lean into at the same time.
One of my favorite things to discuss in interviews is other interviews that I have done, not as an interviewee, but as an interviewer. Robin Gibb was one of the most lovely people I've ever met. It made me feel totally comfortable while contradicting me a lot, saying that the Bee Gees were not a disco band, we were blue-eyed soul. And when I said Americans have no referent for the idea of blue-eyed soul, he was perfectly pleasant about it. And the Spice Girls were just the opposite of that. Melanie B and Melanie C were some of the nastiest people I've ever met.
These are people that interviewed you.
No, all of them, I interviewed them.
There's a part of you that is just a music lover. And you started out writing about music in New York. You wrote record reviews, and you're a DJ, and you're an enthusiastic collector of music. I think it's interesting when you say that as an only child, you kind of don't care about anybody else. But when it comes to music, you care deeply about what other people have done and why it matters.
So I've been thinking a lot about AI and whether it will ever be capable of producing music that anyone cares about. And yeah, I wonder if it's true that we love music as a communication from the souls of other people, or whether there are wonderful, profound, and fun, delightful things that can be said in music without there being someone saying them. I look forward to finding out, but like all musicians, I guess I am rather afraid of finding out. And I imagine that AI is going to worm its way into our hearts through ambient music first, in that all it has to do to qualify as ambient music is not be too surprising. If you take the average of 200 pieces of ambient music, probably what you're going to come up with is more ambient music, and some of it might be nice.
Sure.
Maybe. Whereas I don't think that's going to be true of singer-songwriter music or polka or conceptual music. I think the last thing that AI would be able to work with well is to make an interesting piece of conceptual music.
If you gave AI a container and a set of limitations, write 20 songs that are 3 minutes long or less that start with the letter I. If you started to confine it, it would be interesting to see what it does. I understand you're not even talking about it in terms of lyrics. You're talking about it in terms of music. But I actually think that it probably thrives given a set of conditions and a kind of gamification of writing songs or writing lyrics.
Even Sondheim compared writing lyrics to filling out a crossword puzzle. And he had direct experience with designing crossword puzzles, so he knew what he was talking about. Yes and no, though. If you give an unsophisticated AI an assignment to write 20 songs with a title beginning with I, the first song is probably going to be about iambic pentameter. And maybe the second song will be about an ibex. So its concerns are not human, but they're not interestingly about itself either.
It's not self-aware.
Right. But I think it's demonstrated pretty well that it can pretend to be self-aware. Sorry, I brought up the tricky topic of AI. I really meant something more theoretical.
I'm happy that you brought it up because it gives me a sense of what you're talking about. And I want to know what you're thinking about and talking about right now. I mean, that's kind of the purpose of what we're doing. But it is interesting because, I mean, I have heard you in past interviews talk about how you don't feel that your lyric writing is necessarily autobiographical, and that while it might not be like filling out a crossword puzzle, that there is something of a craft in it, and that you don't necessarily feel like you're revealing yourself.
I would say not that I don't find it autobiographical, but that the way in which it's autobiographical is usually trivial. In Will You Love Me Tomorrow, Jerry Goffin is not expressing his own personal wish to be loved tomorrow, and he's not expressing the Shirelles' wish to be loved tomorrow. He's expressing everyone's wish to be loved tomorrow.
Tonight you're mine completely. You give your love so sweetly. Tonight the light of love is in your eyes. But will you love me tomorrow?
If it were autobiographical, it might have too many place names and awkward pronouns and things that he wouldn't want the Shirelles to have to be singing about. For one thing, he was married to the person he was writing the song with, so it could have been very, very awkward. Because if she didn't love him tomorrow, it wasn't going to go well for the rest of their careers.
But in your extensive experience of writing love songs, have you dipped into the well of your own personal desire, loss, hope, attraction? It certainly feels like you have.
I'm sure I have, but the distinction between the experiences that I'm describing of my own and experiences that I'm describing that everyone has, I don't like the songs more because they correspond more to my own personal experience. The song that I really like performing live is Zombie Boy, maybe partly because it's distant enough from my own experience and it's intentionally shocking to a silly degree. If I wrote about my own experience, I could very easily make it intentionally shocking to a silly degree, but it wouldn't be about necrophilia and necropedophilia with magic and science. Wouldn't be Zombie Boy.
2 roosters I slew, and with all of my might, I prayed hard for you in Haiti at night. Your skin has turned blue, and your hair has turned white. Must be the voodoo of this Haitian moonlight.
I like that you say that maybe you learned about the concerns of other people through other songs. I think probably you also learned about it through books and film. I know that you were originally drawn to film. I mean, what I've heard is that your first hope before thinking you'd be a songwriter was maybe you'd be a film director or a filmmaker.
I think you learn a lot about relationships with other people through greeting cards and what people really want to hear in life that can be conveyed through greeting cards. It's like, happy graduation, and congratulations on your new baby daughter. Happy Mother's Day. These are important things to say that you don't really say in songs. Maybe they're just too simple to say in songs, but they're also too specific. But people want their particular important life events to be important to other people, if only for the 30 seconds of buying the greeting card. But they're also good for telling you, this you can joke about, this you can't joke about. Like, you're not making a joke about someone giving birth. I have learned the hard way in some cases when not to make a joke about someone else's important life event.
So rather than talking about books or film or music, we should also remember that greeting cards can teach us a lot about who we are.
I was using that as the reductio ad absurdum. Of course, other artworks can teach us about other people, but let's start with greeting cards because they're kind of the silly way of attacking that subject, but also it's not profound. It's about the most important things that happen to us.
Well, I want to stop for a second and acknowledge that as of a year ago, in an interview that I read with you, you were having a hard time finishing songs, that your relationship with songwriting had been sort of interrupted post-COVID.
Yeah, I got COVID 5 years ago, and I have finished less than 5 songs since, so I'm down to less than a song a year. Fortunately, I also have a shelf full of notebooks full of songs, so no one will notice if I never write a song again.
What is the difference between starting a song and finishing a song? When you say you haven't finished a song, it kind of implies that you've started songs. So what does it mean to finish a song?
Okay, I will now write a song. The title will be Bang. Bang! I have finished the song. So there doesn't have to be a difference between starting and finishing a song. But I've just performed the reductio ad absurdum of how to write a short song, as well as how to write conceptual art, which I might not be so bad at after all, now that I think about it. So now that you know my song, Bang, I have a hard time expressing what it is to finish a song. Stephen Sondheim, who I will keep coming back to, didn't want to finish a song until the play had been on Broadway for a while. He hated having to finish things. He wanted to see how they work in the play and be able to go back and make revisions. And I, having worked with actors, I know that they absolutely hate changing their lines after they're already memorized. For a long time, I couldn't stand remixes and revisions. And I just thought that once you have made the statement, you should stand by your statement. And if you don't like it, just make another one. But since I've become a DJ, I really understand the point of remixes and making songs shorter and longer according to where they're needed. Partly because if you don't, someone else will. There may be a reason to do an 8-minute song, but if somebody doesn't care about the toy piano solo for the last 3 minutes, they'll just lop it off at the end.
But when it comes to finishing things, you, from what I can tell, didn't seem to have trouble finishing things for a long time. You were a flood. I mean, if anything, it seemed like it was quite easy to finish a song. You know, you said earlier that in order to write a song, you need to tune out the rest of the world until the thing is done. And yet, you chose to write so often sitting in loud bars, which is a very difficult place to tune out the rest of the world, but something about that input helped you to go inward and write these songs.
Actually, not too loud bars. I specifically don't like writing in very loud bars, but I like writing with music on in the background. And I've been doing that since the 80s. Trying to write a song in silence, I already have a song in my head much of the time. For the last 2 days, I have had an unfortunate mashup of Marianne Faithfull's Go Away From My World and Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville, because unfortunately there's a little bit of melodic overlap between those two songs, and I start with one and end up in the other. It's driving me crazy.
Go away from my world. Watching the sun bake. All of those tourists covered with oil. Can't you see it never worked from the start? On my front porch lawn. Smell those shrimp, they're beginning to fall. A broken heart, wasting away again in Margaritaville.
But this is exactly the problem with trying to write songs in silence, is that there's already a song. So if I replace that with there's already a song that I can hear, I can tune that one out or listen to it and respond to it. Like if I'm in a bar and they're playing Jungle Boogie, I can think of, well, what other sorts of landscapes could there be a boogie for? A desert boogie or a tundra boogie or a moonscape boogie, and right from there. Get it on.
So this points to part of the way you like to write, which is to write with a concept, right into a concept. So many of your extended projects have been conceptual. obviously the best known is 69 Love Songs, which I understand evolved a little bit from the original concept. But I mean, at a certain point, you knew you had to write 69 of these. And I imagine that there was a time when you had 62 of them written and you knew that you just had 7 to go.
Well, no, because I knew I was going to overwrite. So I stopped counting at 100. I didn't want to write 69 love songs and stop and say, these are the best 69 songs I could possibly write. I deliberately overwrote. So yeah, there was no point where I was saying, oh, 7 more to go. It was more that I was choosing from a pool of songs that I was writing.
Why did you reduce it to 69? I think originally you were thinking you would do 100 and then you reduced it to 69. Is it the sort of innuendo of 69?
So both numbers are good. 100 is better in some ways. It's more Warholian, it's more commercial, it's more easily divisible. It's 10 by 10, 5 by 20, 4 by 25. 100 songs is a great idea, but for love songs, 69 is a lot better because it directly relates to an act of love, if not the act of love. So I only thought of 100 love songs for about 2 minutes before I came up with the more promising number of 69.
As I understand it, you were approached over time occasionally to try to adapt it for the stage, but your insistence was only if all 69 were performed. You didn't want a reduced version of it on the stage.
Well, I don't say that those 69 need to be performed, but that there need to be 69 songs and that they should all be love songs. They don't need to be those ones in particular. I can write more, or there could even be songs from my other albums. I wouldn't probably look kindly on a show called 69 Love Songs that was 69 love songs by other people, but I don't know. I could imagine exceptions to that, as long as it wasn't disrupting the original idea.
69 Love Songs hasn't made it to Broadway, but...
Well, parts of 69 Love Songs have made it to Broadway in the show All In. Oh, you were about to ask me.
Perfect.
I've interrupted you. Sorry.
You've answered the question.
Yes, and the show All In, which was fully written before I had any knowledge of it. So my only role was to agree to it and then to go see it on stage.
It is an example, I think, of what so many songwriters talk about, which is that once you put your work out in the world, it sort of ceases to belong to you to a certain degree. Well, I wonder what your experience of hearing those songs in that context was.
It was like hearing other people's ideas of what my song means. I try not to talk about particular covers of my songs. I encourage them. I like them to exist. I feel like their success rate is wildly variable. But that's true of practically anything.
Do you necessarily know what your songs mean when you write them?
Mean? No. I would say a significant number of my songs are not written to mean something in particular. I didn't write Punk Love to express a feeling that could only be expressed with the words punk love. I also didn't write experimental music love with the idea that there was only one way of expressing this powerful emotion that I just can't get out without the phrase experimental music love. However, I'm not sure there is any other way of expressing bang. So some of my songs mean more particular things than others, I guess. I mean, the overall meaning of any of my songs is, this is what my record collection looks like. And this is how my brain works.
This is exactly what I wanted to get to with you, because I think that you reveal a lot about yourself, not only in the words that you say, but also in the references and the musical references, which are eclectic and all over the place, but that add up to somebody who loves a lot of different kinds of music. And, you know, you haven't particularly constrained yourself But it is clear that electronic music and dance music was very meaningful to you. And you return to it over and over again. The relationship with synthesizers is kind of coming and going, and it seems like it's a root relationship for you.
Yeah, I've never actually taken synthesizer lessons, which you can now, but you couldn't when I was young enough to take them. But I did take organ lessons, and that for me was my most important music lesson experience was the feeling of putting down your left big toe onto a bass pedal and having it literally shake the gigantic room, the huge stone room, playing a church organ. That is a formative experience for me. Like Tina Weymouth said that she didn't really understand what it meant to play the bass until she was pregnant and playing the bass on stage amplified, realizing that the vibrations that she was making with her fingers were actually affecting and shaping the fetus inside her womb, and that she better mean what she's saying. She better do it well, because there's a person in there. My parallel experience with that is playing the church organ. You can vibrate the building with your left toe, but you can also do it wrong. You can press two keys right next to each other down very easily and vibrate the building in a dissonant, chaotic way that is going to give people stomach aches.
You know, there's a song on 50 Song Memoir about working the synthesizer where you describe the elements of working a synthesizer: attack, decay, sustain, release.
Excellent shape and below, aka ASO. Attack, decay, sustain, release, which means how loud you are.
You describe it with the wide eyes of somebody who has just figured out how to work this thing. I suspect that's how most of us have learned how to work a synthesizer, by twiddling knobs and moving stuff around until we figure out how it works. But one of the things that I loved about that image was that it seemed to be from the point of view of a young, fresh person who was discovering it. And in some ways, I think the same was true of a lot of the songs on that record. You kind of, or the Stephin character who's telling the story, seems to be telling it to you from that moment in their life. Did you go back and try to put yourself in the headspace of a 4-year-old Stephin, a 10-year-old Stephin, a 15-year-old Steve, dancing and loving and moving and longing? Did you have to go back into that version of yourself as you were writing those songs?
It's 10 years ago, I don't remember. But I do know that in How to Play the Synthesizer, which is placed to correspond to my 14th year when I got my first synthesizer, I say, pour yourself a scotch.
Pour yourself a scotch.
So I'm imagining addressing an adult rather than addressing other 14-year-olds. Not that 14-year-olds can't necessarily pour themselves a scotch, but that I'm not advising them to do so.
Right. So you're not necessarily a 14-year-old in the song.
I was the 50-year-old me talking to a scotch drinking listener. So I didn't have zero education in synthesis. I did have the None Such Guide to Electronic Music, which is wonderful. It's a record that does kind of what the song How to Play the Synthesizer does. It tells you what a square wave sounds like and things like that. And I had a book on electronic music, which was starting with circuit design. I didn't do very much of that, but I do miss Radio Shack and the ability to actually put something together electronically that would make the sort of beeping sound you told it to. You used to be able to do that through shopping in a way that is now very difficult.
Like go to the store and try stuff out?
Yeah, you used to be able to go to the store and buy a length of wire in a way that is no longer easy to do.
I'm reminded when you say you had the None Such electronic record that, I mean, None Such today is not the None Such that it necessarily was in the 60s, but you have these two label associations throughout your career, Merge Records and None Such.
Yes, in the US, my two long-term labels have been Merge and Nonesuch.
Nonesuch, you say as a kid you had this Nonesuch record. Did it mean something to you when you got to sign with Nonesuch?
You know what? The way that I got onto Nonesuch was that I was standing in my lawyer's office, my entertainment lawyer's office, and he had a copy of Billboard, and on the front of Billboard, the article said, Emmylou Harris signs to Nonesuch. And I suddenly realized that that's what I should do. It's like, oh, Nonesuch is a major label that is now eclectic enough that this is a good match. And we went over to Nonesuch and they agreed. Yeah, we're kind of perfect for each other. We're the union of high and low art and pop and bubblegum meeting the more esoteric end of music with an emphasis on lyrics. So perfect for Nonesuch. But the reason I wanted to be on a major label was to get health insurance. And that was not possible on Merge at the time or for much later. So now I have health insurance.
Huh.
For the moment, we'll see what happens politically around that.
The mix of high and low art, I love that description coming from you of what it is.
Both are very important. Can't live without both. Or I can't. I have friends who live entirely without low art, and I probably don't have any friends who live entirely without high art. I recognize the distinction between the two with that terminology is absurd, and I'm using it intentionally. I am very much not a snob, but I have friends who are, and I love them.
You're not a snob, but you certainly are no stranger to having strong opinions about things.
People who don't have strong opinions should be taken out back and shot.
Do you think the role of criticism in art is an important one?
Depends on the art.
Let's take yours.
If I had role models demographically, I guess they would probably be more or less the Smiths and the Pet Shop Boys. Both the Smiths and the Pet Shop Boys are fronted with people who were originally in the music press and whose lyrics are very much informed by a postmodern approach to it being okay to incorporate other people's work into your work. My first 20 years of putting out records were largely self-consciously, overtly about other people's records. And I feel like I need to get back to that. My roots are postmodern, and I should drink more from the postmodern well, I guess. Where am I going with that?
Criticism.
Criticism. What role does criticism play? I'm one of those people who agrees with the statement that you should not read your own press. The first review that I read of 69 Love Songs banged on about how there was unfortunate filler, like Papa Was a Rodeo, which is a country song, and country songs are beneath contempt.
Papa was a rodeo, Mama was a rock and roll band. I could play guitar and rope a steer before I learned to stand. Home was anywhere with diesel gas, love was a trucker's hand. Never stuck around long enough for a one-night stand. Before you kiss me, you should know Papa was a rodeo.
So, the same review also said that I should get the Lawrence Hart Award for ugly, miserable, alcoholic, homosexual, dwarf, genius lyricist. Probably in a different order, but those are the adjectives. And these are both memorable things to say about 69 Love Songs, but they were on somebody's blog. And if I hadn't been looking for it, I wouldn't have found it. So now, since then, I've grown up a little and I realized that you should not go looking for insults. Basically, let people send you reviews that they feel are insightful and reasonably respectful. I think no one is going to actually send me reviews quite like you're an ugly, miserable, homosexual, alcoholic dwarf. genius lyricist. They'd probably stop at dwarf and decide not to send me the review. So yeah, there's a role of criticism, and the role of the artist is to ignore the critics. That's not a trivial thing. It's an important part of mental health.
On the other hand, as you say, you started out as a music journalist. And I suppose there's an important distinction between journalism and criticism.
I really didn't start out as a music journalist. I was a copy editor at Spin. I was a journalist, but I was not a music journalist. I recently wrote a book review for the New York Times of the new Simon Rich book, The Secret Public, and I'm already regretting having done that. I think I should stay out of anything even adjacent to music criticism.
So you were able to write a book review. I mean, that's just an interesting thing about the way the brain works, right? Like it's hard to finish a song, but you wrote a book review.
Took a month and involved at least 3 editors who were saying, why don't you put some of yourself in this? Also, it took me a month to read the 700-page book. I used to read 3 novels a week, and now I read 1 novel every 2 years. Maybe. I'm not actually thinking of what those... Basically, I'm not reading nonfiction.
The focus?
Yeah. I actually had this problem in college, too, where I could read myth, I could read fable, but mostly I was reading nonfiction, being in college. But I had a hard time caring about characters, knowing that they weren't real. I had that actually for film also.
And you're having a hard time writing about characters that are not real also.
Yeah, but it's easy to write. In songwriting, generally it's too short to have truth value. The Steve Miller song, I Love You, where the entire lyric is I love you, arguably has no truth value, because if he is singing to a particular person who he does in fact love, he is also singing to a million people who he's never met and presumably doesn't love, except in a different sense. Maybe if he happens to love everyone. But is that love? Truth value in songs is just a cloud.
My father was in that band. He was the piano player on that record.
Must be why that occurred to me, right.
I spent my childhood standing off stage watching Steve Miller sing a lot of songs that it was clear he didn't mean at all.
Well, some of them are covers, in fact.
Interestingly, I never felt, and maybe because I knew him, I don't know, I never felt the need to believe him or question, does he mean this or does he not mean this? But your songs feel personal.
People say that about Bob Dylan, and Bob Dylan is like, I am going to take all of Harry Smith's anthology of American folk music, change the lyrics about a third so that they become artistic in a way that the college students will like. And there you are. That's originality. And the originality brigade drive me crazy because the folk process is so much better than originality. If something is traditional but tweaked, that's interesting. But if something is violently original, it's incomprehensible and dull. It's only in relation to other culture does an artwork acquire any interest. I have spoken.
Absolutely. And we are constantly in conversation with the things that influence us, that affect us. I totally agree. I love the idea of the originality police. Nonetheless, I think nobody would ever accuse you of being unoriginal. I mean, I think that process may be true, but we can't help but be ourselves if we have anything to offer.
Maybe we are all equally original. I don't know. Does it matter how original we are? Again, comparing yourself to other people is not my forte.
No, I get that. And it's because it's funny. One of the things I wanted to ask you about earlier, you could feel that I was kind of leaning towards it. It's like, well, did you feel that you were different? Did you recognize that you were special? Did you know you had a gift? Did you know you had a talent? I mean, you grew up so different that it would be hard to compare yourself to anybody else, but you were compelled to do a thing, to express yourself, to create stuff at a time when a lot of kids are not.
I wanted to be in film. I never wanted to be a musician. I still don't want to be a musician. Yeah. I want to be Stan Brakhage.
You moved to LA at one point to pursue doing more film work.
Soundtrack work. Yeah.
But initially, you wanted to be in film.
I wanted to be the auteur. But before that, I wanted to be a planetarium artist. As a teenager, I was a megalomaniac. As a child, I was a megalomaniac. Before I wanted to be a planetarium artist, I wanted to be the auteur imagineer. I wanted to be Walt Disney. I wanted to design my own theme parks, which would only trivially happen to include movies that I. Anyway, I wanted to be Wagner, essentially, a Wagner or Disney making a glorious Gesamtkunstwerk that would swallow the world. Now I want to write Bang, which is arguably a Gesamtkunstwerk swallowing the world.
Have you been to Luna Luna?
No, I have not been to Luna Luna. It seems like a great place to take pictures.
It's very Instagrammable.
Yeah. This is the right age for Luna Luna. Maybe I would want to go off hours. I don't want to be in a crowd of people who is at Luna Luna.
What does that mean? You don't necessarily think you want to be a member of that mob?
I don't want to encounter a group of screaming children who are encountering Keith Haring for the first time. It seems kind of grubby. Maybe I can go when they're closing it, because it seems like watching them disassemble it would be fun. Note that I have just said in 2 minutes that I started out wanting to be, as a child, a theme park designer, and then I pivot 2 minutes later to being horrified by children encountering a theme park. Yeah, sorry, I don't like children. I never liked children.
Even as a child, you never liked children.
Especially as a child. No, as a child, I had a horror of other children and their hands, their sticky hands. Disgusting. They're basically overgrown zygotes.
Did you want to be older sooner? Do you want to be an adult as quickly as possible?
Desperately. I hated being a child.
Did you try to act older? Do you remember trying to pass as older in some way?
Oh, I was 8 inches high.
But you were ready to get out of that phase.
I was carded on a daily basis until I grew a beard. In my 40s, I was carded. So, yeah, I'm inherently childlike, I guess.
To your dismay and chagrin, considering that's not what you were going for.
My horror, yes.
When you say this thing about being carded, it brings up the question about bars and drinking and the role of just drinking in your creative process over the years.
I was actually talking about cigarettes even. They didn't even believe I was 18, let alone 21. But yeah, drinking too. Yeah, the role of drinking is important. And I seem to be part of a long tradition of artists for whom the superego must be poisoned in order to let the brain function properly.
It's a bad recipe for longevity.
I'm not interested in longevity. My 83-year-old mother really wants to live to be 100, and I have no idea why. She can't explain it to me.
Do you find yourself drinking as much today as you did when you were writing all those songs? 69 love songs and 50-song memoir and those big projects?
No. A little goes a long way for me. So I drink for a long period of time, but I don't drink a lot during it. Actually, I haven't had more than 3 drinks in a day, even on New Year's Eve, in a few years.
But drinking has been part of the process.
Yeah, specifically alcohol. Marijuana doesn't work for me creatively. I am good at having one drink and then having an outpouring of creativity, which vanishes after 2.5 drinks. But one drink, superego shuts down a little, and I'm able to have uninhibited creativity. I'd be interested in exploring what other kinds of mild poison would have that effect, but so far only that. Although, when they were trying to treat my long COVID, a psychiatrist put me on the 2 childhood speed drugs, Adderall and Ritalin. I don't remember which was which, but one spiked my blood pressure to 199, and the other one made me narcoleptic, and that was on the child's dose. But the one that only made me narcoleptic rather than making me unable to stand up also made me feel normal. Like my brain was working at its normal level of alertness and fizzy creativity that I haven't had since COVID. So maybe somewhere there's a chemical that would work for me. Otherwise, I have a shelf of notebooks of finished songs ready to go anyway, so it really doesn't matter.
So when you take these notebooks off the shelf and you open them, do you remember what you find? Are you surprised by yourself, what you discover there?
I try not to look at them too often. I have something in my own work method that is like the folk process, where if I forget how the melody went a bit, it's probably an improvement because the way I will stitch it together will be smoothing over the rough edges. It's like sea glass. You want it to be like Irving Berlin, saying things in the simplest way. I just read in The Economist, I think yesterday, there's a quote from Johnny Cash saying, the way to say anything is to just say it. And I think that's right. That's the way to say something that will connect with people emotionally is generally to seem to be saying it directly to them in the simplest possible way. You could say that that's modernist bullshit and that's Le Corbusier and no one wants to live in a Le Corbusier. But you could also say that that's Irving Berlin, that's Dolly Parton. You say it completely and you get out. And that's bubblegum. And that's folk music. You have 5 notes and you talk about a ghost in a Scottish castle for 3 minutes and then you stop. And it sure was sad about that ghost in that Scottish castle. That isn't life like that.
I think we have a second song. Can we work that into bang, or is that a second one now?
Maybe there's an alternative spelling of bang used in Scotland.
Does it have more consonants in it?
That would be Welsh. The B-Y-N-G-H thing.
I hear you placing yourself in a certain legacy and tradition. I can see how you do. I mean, you are certainly not afraid of a short song. There's not a lot of fat on your songs, which is why I thought it was somewhat amusing to me when you finally made an album of intentionally short songs called Quickies, because in fact, so many of your songs, and some of the longest Quickie songs are longer than some of the shorter songs on 69 Love Songs or some of your other albums.
The shortest song on 69 Love Songs is 15 seconds long, and the shortest song on Quickies is 18 seconds long. And a third of 69 Love Songs would fit on Quickies, where the rule is 2 minutes and 15 seconds and under. So I wasn't claiming to break new ground with Quickies.
What is it about writing short songs, though?
I like little things, chihuahuas, ukuleles, my Mini Cooper. I like miniaturization. I'm very interested in dollhouses and model villages. I'm 5'3". I used to have a night called Runt for the diminutive gentleman and his admirers. I have a bathroom full of very small books, which are great for bathroom reading. I just love little stuff. My favorite food is bento box, the tiny servings of various foods. So I thought of Quickies kind of as a bento box.
That was a little bit of a digression because, as you were saying, the folk tradition is sea glass. But what I think your contribution here is that your writing is clever and surprising given that kind of container. You're a serious writer, but it's deceptive because it's in these little packages, I think. So it might not necessarily be obvious always how much writing is taking place. You're not repurposing a third of popular folk canon and singing it in a slightly different cadence. You're really writing.
I feel like the folk process exists for all of us as a banquet to choose from and to make further food out of, further sustenance out of. I love it, and if you don't love it, you need to learn more about it, is my attitude towards intellectual property and things that have fallen out of intellectual property. 1923 is a very interesting year, and everything in it is no longer copyrighted. And is therefore yours. You own it as much as anyone else, including Walt Disney.
And AI.
And they are.
Is inspiration a real thing to you? Do you believe in inspiration?
Well, the gods have punished me for my dependence on inspiration by withdrawing it. And I used to know how to finish things. I have forgotten that. So do not, kids, do not depend on inspiration. Know how to start and complete without depending on anything so fickle as inspiration. Any teenager can be inspired, but to be an artist in the long term, you need to know how to work when you don't feel like it, just like everybody else does. If you're going to have a garden, you can't only tend it when you feel like it. If you're going to raise a child, you can't only do it when you feel like it.
Do you feel that inspiration or whatever that thing is that helped you finish a song will return to you? I understand you say, it doesn't matter. Don't worry, people. There's a lot of songs that I can draw from. There will be more Stephin Merritt songs.
I doubt anyone is actually sincerely worried about me. I suppose I say that because I don't want to talk too much about what I cannot do. There's lots of things I can't do. Sing heavy metal or calypso, for that matter. I'm too small to play the accordion or the upright bass. I have an upright bass, but I have to stand on a phone book and no one is allowed to look at me. I'm too small to even hold an accordion, really. This is not a problem in my life. And if I can't finish a song that is more than one word long, that is not necessarily a problem in my life because almost no one else can do that either. Also, there are many kinds of music that don't involve finishing what I would consider a song.
Well, if you relied on inspiration for the majority of your creative career, that's an intense amount of inspiration in the sense that you had these projects that were quite ambitious. I'm going to write a bunch of these songs and I'm going to do it in the space of a year. The only way that gets done is through what I think you're saying is inspiration. I consider that to be desire, like a need or at least a strong desire to accomplish a thing.
Well, chutzpah.
Chutzpah.
It requires a certain combination of neurological traits that I seem to have lost through some sort of esoteric brain damage that we don't understand very well.
But that is the culmination of a lifetime of what you refer to as weird diseases.
When I was yay high till I was 3, I suffered from petty more epilepsy. Any excitement gave me a fit, but there were drugs to cure me of it. Weird diseases, I get weird diseases. Whenever Krishna sneezes, I get weird diseases.
Well, I hope it's the culmination. That would be nice. Now I have more normal diseases on top of those. I just 45 minutes ago had a conversation with my doctor about wearing a contraption in my sleep that dislocates my jaw. So, yay! I'm sure that there are many more weird diseases for me. Unless I'm decapitated by a helicopter on my way home, I'll be in for a lot more suffering and impermanence.
Well, we started with impermanence. It's a great place to end. And I never thought I would end a conversation with you, Stephin, by hoping many more weird diseases and opportunities to suffer. But I do hope that for you.
Thank you. More suffering is good. Suffering is life itself.
Suffering is life itself.
And vice versa.
Stephin, thank you for suffering through this last hour with me. It has been an adventure.
Thank you. I hope to see you soon.
I do too. It would really be lovely.
Everybody's somebody's fetish, whether ground dumb or cutely coquettish, mainly like me or no, not nuttish. Everybody's somebody's fetish.
This has been a WBGO Studios production. To learn more about WBGO Studios' award-winning podcasts, special concerts, live streams, and more, visit wbgo.org/studios.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.